The wind came down from the Bitterroot country with teeth in it. It crossed the high grass, shouldered loose boards from abandoned sheds, and worried at the seams of Silas Creed's cabin. By late October, frost stayed white beneath the cottonwoods all day, and water froze in the horse trough before sundown. Silas had lived alone through 9 such winters on the Broken Spur ranch. He knew what cold could take. Each morning, he rose before the stove went dark and crossed the yard to feed the horses. He moved with the balance of a man accustomed to carrying a revolver, though the colt at his hip had not cleared leather in 3 years. Folks in Mercer still called him a gunslinger. They said it softly when he entered the mercantile, as if the word might wake something. Silas never corrected them. His ranch sat 12 miles north of town, where the valley narrowed. He could mend tack, set a splint, and shoe a mare. What he could not do was make a biscuit that did not resemble a river stone. By autumn, the work had worn him thin. He forgot meals when fences broke. A spring fever had nearly killed him because no one noticed him shaking beneath 3 blankets. So he posted a notice at the Mercer stage office. Cook wanted at Broken Spur, winter wages, room provided, respectable household, apply by letter. He nearly tore it down the next morning. Instead, he left it hanging crooked beside advertisements for patent tonic and a missing bay gelding. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived in careful handwriting. Mrs. Clara Vale wrote that she was 29, widowed, capable with bread, preserves, poultry, and household accounts. She asked whether the room had a sound roof and whether wages would be paid monthly. Silas answered yes to both. He did not ask why a young widow would travel 200 miles for a cook's position before winter. People came west carrying questions they did not want answered. Her second letter said she would arrive on the northbound stage on October 28th. That morning, Silas drove to Mercer through an iron sky. He tied the team outside the stage office and waited beneath the awning. The stage was 2 hours late. When it appeared through hard snow, the driver dragged down a carpet bag. Then a woman stepped from the coach. She was slight, dressed in a brown wool coat polished pale at the cuffs. One hand held a small valise. The other held the hand of a little girl. Silas stared. The child was perhaps 6. She wore a blue knitted cap and a coat too large through the shoulders. A wooden horse, no longer than a man's palm, protruded from her pocket. She stood close against the woman's skirt and watched Silas with grave gray eyes. The woman found him at once. Men like Silas were easy to identify, even without introductions. The black hat, the scar beneath his right ear, the stillness that made movement around him seem wasteful. Mr. Creed, Mrs. Vale, her chin lifted a fraction. This is my niece, Lucy. The girl's mitten tightened around her hand. Silas looked from the child to the single carpet bag. Your letter did not mention a niece. No. Snow clicked against the awning. I hired 1 cook. You did. Clara's voice was tired, but it did not shake. And 1 cook is what you will pay. The stage driver set down a small trunk and retreated to his team. Across the street, 2 men had stopped loading feed to watch. Silas could have said no. He had agreed to room 1 woman, not shelter a child through winter. Children needed warmth at night, medicine when they coughed, patience when they broke things. His cabin held a rifle over the mantel, and memories he kept shut behind a spare room door. Her mother? He asked. Clara looked past him toward the white hills. Dead. Father? Gone. The girl did not blink. Silas took the trunk and lifted it into the buckboard. Storm will close the north road by dark. Clara remained where she was. Does that mean we are coming? It means I will not leave a child beside a road in snow. It was not welcome, but it was enough. They rode north with Clara beside him, and Lucy wrapped in a buffalo robe between them. The child spoke only once. When the Broken Spur's roof appeared through the blowing snow, she pointed toward the corral. "Horse," she said. "4 of them in that pasture," Silas replied. Lucy studied the shapes. 5. Silas looked again. His black mare stood behind the windbreak, nearly hidden. 5, he allowed. The cabin was larger than Clara expected, and lonelier than she had imagined. Dust lay on the upright piano, and a woman's faded shawl was folded across its bench. Silas carried Clara's trunk to the spare room and stopped in the doorway. A narrow bed stood beneath the window. A cedar chest rested at its foot. On one wall, pale marks showed where pictures had once hung. "You and the girl can take this," he said. "Lucy has a name." His eyes met Clara's. "You and Lucy can take this." Clara nodded. "Thank you." The first supper was quiet. Clara made salt pork, potatoes, and biscuits, so light that Silas ate 4 without noticing. Lucy sat on 2 folded blankets. Before lifting her spoon, she waited for Clara to nod. Silas saw the habit and wondered who had taught the child that food required permission. Afterward, Clara washed the plates. Silas dried them, though he had never dried a plate in his own house. Lucy sat near the stove with the wooden horse. "There are rules," Silas said. Clara kept washing. "I expected some. The riverbank is soft near the bend. She stays away. She does not enter the barn alone. The gray gelding bites." "Anything else?" He glanced at the child. "My room is private. So is the gun cabinet." Clara set a plate in the rack. "Lucy does not touch what is not hers." "Good. My turn." She dried her hands. "You will not shout at her. If the arrangement fails, you speak to me. And if you mean to send us away, you give me enough warning to find another position." Silas felt the old instinct to bristle when terms were put to him in his own house. Then Lucy dropped the wooden horse. The clatter made her flinch before anyone moved. "Fair," he said. For the first week, they lived as 3 strangers taking shelter in the same place. Clara rose before Silas and set coffee on the stove. She learned that he liked eggs cooked hard and bacon nearly burned. He learned that she saved every spoonful of grease and could make yesterday's beans taste new with onion and dried pepper. Lucy followed her from pantry to table, carrying what small hands could manage. She never ran. She never asked for sweets. When Silas entered a room, she became quiet enough to hear the fire settle. On the 4th morning, he found 3 biscuits wrapped in a cloth beside his gloves. Clara had noticed he skipped the noon meal when riding the north fence. He carried them without comment. That evening, he set a smooth blue stone beside Lucy's wooden horse. He had found it in the creek bed miles upriver, a scrap of summer color in the frozen mud. Lucy looked at him across the table. "For the horse's pasture," he said. She placed the horse beside the stone. The next day, it stood there again. Snow closed the road in early November. It softened the valley, covering ruts, bones, and dead grass, beneath one clean silence. The ranch shrank to the distance between the cabin, barn, woodshed, and well. Clara made that small world orderly. She scrubbed the lamp chimneys, stitched flour sacks into curtains, and filled the house with the smell of yeast. Silas repaired the loose leg of her trunk and brought blue yarn when Lucy's cap unraveled. Clara replaced 2 missing buttons on his coat. Neither thanked the other. Gratitude lived in the use of things. Lucy began going to the barn with Silas. At first, she stopped at the threshold, obeying his rule. She watched while he forked hay and rubbed down the horses. One afternoon, he brought out a gentle sorrel mare named Penny. "Hold your hand flat," he told her. Lucy looked toward Clara, who stood hanging linen near the cabin. Clara nodded. The girl extended a palm with a note on it. Penny's lips brushed her mitten. Lucy's eyes widened, but she did not pull away. "Again," she whispered. Silas gave her another oat. By December, Lucy waited for him beside the door each morning, bundled in her oversized coat. They crossed the yard together. Her strides made 3 of his. He shortened his pace without thinking. He showed her how to read tracks in snow. Rabbit prints stitched quick lines beneath the fence. A fox left narrow, deliberate marks near the henhouse. Deer broke the crust deeply and dragged their hooves. "What made those?" Lucy asked one morning. Silas examined a set of prints beside the woodpile. "You did." She looked down at her boots, then up at him. The smallest smile moved across her face. It was the first he had seen. Inside, Clara stood at the window with flour on her hands. She watched Silas make another trail beside Lucy's, then turned back so she could identify it. She did not smile. Not yet. But some caution left her shoulders. On winter evenings, Clara mended near the stove. Lucy arranged her horse and blue stone into quiet adventures on the floor. Silas cleaned tack at the table. The silence among them changed slowly. It stopped feeling like an empty chair and became something shared, warm and unforced. One night, a blizzard buried the lower windows. Wind struck the cabin hard enough to tremble the lantern flame. Lucy woke crying. Silas was in the main room feeding the stove when Clara carried her out. The girl's face was pressed against Clara's neck. "Just the wind," Clara murmured. Lucy shook her head. The door. Silas understood before Clara did. It was not the storm frightening her. It was the sound of a door slamming somewhere inside memory. He took a rawhide strap from a peg and secured the latch so it could not lift in the gusts. Then he sat on the floor beside it, his back against the boards. "It stays closed," he said. Lucy watched him from Clara's arms. "You sure?" Silas pulled once on the strap. "I am." Clara made a bed for Lucy near the stove. Silas stayed beside the door until the child slept. In the morning, no one mentioned it. Christmas came with clear skies and cold so deep that trees split in the hills like distant rifle shots. Clara made a small feast from what they had: roast chicken, carrots glazed with the last of the molasses, and an apple pie from fruit she had dried in September. Lucy gave Silas a square of cloth with a crooked black horse stitched into it. "For your pocket," she said. Silas ran a thumb over the uneven thread. "Fine horse. It is Penny. Then it is exact." He gave her a carved wooden stable. He had worked on it after midnight for 3 weeks, shaving pine by lamplight, fitting the roof with small cedar shingles. Lucy touched every wall before placing her horse inside. For Clara, he had bought a pair of lined gloves in Mercer. She held them longer than needed. "You should not have spent this. Your old ones let in cold." Clara looked down. "They were my sisters." It was the first piece of Lucy's past she had offered. That night, after Lucy slept, Clara sat at the table while Silas banked the fire. "Her name was Rose," she said. "My sister." Silas waited. "She married a man named Abel Rusk. He drank. When she died of lung fever, he left Lucy with neighbors and disappeared. I found her 6 months later. Why did you not mention her in the letter?" Clara looked at the new gloves beside her hands. "Because 3 other employers had refused me when I did. So you lied. I left something out." That is a polished name for it. She accepted the words without defense. "If I had told you, would you have hired me?" Silas looked toward the spare room. A thin line of lamplight showed beneath the door. "No," he said. "That is why." He should have been angry. Instead, he thought of Lucy standing at the stage office, waiting to learn whether winter had a place for her. January passed, then February. Icicles began dripping from the eaves at noon. Lucy's coat no longer hung loose. Clara's cooking and the ranch air had put color in her cheeks. She spoke more, though never loudly. She named the hens after flowers. She learned the alphabet from labels on flour tins and cattle medicine. Silas planed a flat board, painted it black, and hung it low on the wall so she could write with chalk. Clara began to laugh sometimes. The first time came when the red rooster entered the kitchen and struck Silas's hat to the floor. The sound surprised all three of them. Then Silas laughed too. In March, the thaw came hard. Snowmelt rushed through every cut in the land. The river swelled brown and fast, grinding branches against the banks. Silas spent long days moving cattle from the lower pasture. He returned one evening soaked through. A bowl of stew waited beside the stove, covered with a plate. His dry socks hung warming nearby. Lucy had drawn 3 figures on the slate, one tall, one in a dress, and one small between them. Behind the figures stood a square house with smoke rising from its chimney. Silas stopped in front of it. "That the ranch?" he asked. Lucy nodded. "Who is that?" He pointed to the tall figure, though he knew. "You. Looks too friendly." She considered the drawing. Then she added a straight line at the figure's hip for a gun. "Better," Silas said. Clara turned away to hide her smile. 2 days later, a rider came up the south road. Silas saw him from the barn. The man rode a lathered chestnut and wore a checked coat despite the warmth. He was broad through the middle, with a beard trimmed close to a pale face. Clara stepped onto the porch carrying a basket. The basket slipped from her hands. "Take Lucy inside," she said. The child looked at the rider and froze. Silas crossed the yard before the man reached the hitching rail. "Broken Spur?" the stranger asked. "You found it." His gaze went past Silas to Clara. "I surely did." Clara pushed Lucy behind her skirt. "Abel." The name settled over the yard heavier than weather. Abel Rusk dismounted. His boots were good, his horse expensive, and the smile he gave Clara held no pleasure. "Been looking half a year," he said. "You made it difficult. You were not looking when she was hungry. She is my daughter." Lucy clutched Clara's dress. Silas stood between Abel and the porch. "The child does not want to see you." Abel's eyes shifted to the colt at Silas's side. Recognition came slowly, followed by caution. "Creed," he said. "I heard you had gone tame." "You heard enough." Abel reached into his coat. Silas's hand moved, not to draw, but to rest near the holster. Abel stopped and withdrew a folded paper with 2 fingers. "Court order from Helena. Her aunt took her without consent. I am her lawful father." Clara descended 1 step. "The neighbors wrote statements. They saw you leave. A man can return for his own blood. Why now?" Abel's jaw shifted. "My mother died. Left property. The trust passes through the girl." There it was. Not love. Land. Silas took the paper. It bore a seal and enough official language to cause trouble, though the signature at the bottom looked hurried. "You will leave," he said. Abel smiled again. "Sheriff comes Friday. I only rode ahead to be civil. Then be civil somewhere else." Abel mounted. Before turning away, he looked toward Lucy. "Pack her things." Lucy made a small sound. Silas stepped close enough to place a hand on the chestnut's bridle. "Look at me when you speak." For one breath, the old life stood between them. Silas felt its familiar coldness. The whole world narrowed to distance, angle, and the weight of iron. Abel saw it too. He pulled the reins and rode south without another word. That evening, the ranch lost its rhythm. Clara packed their trunk. She folded Lucy's dresses, the blue cap, and the stitched cloth Silas kept in his coat pocket whenever he rode. Her hands moved quickly, as if speed could hold fear at bay. "What are you doing?" Silas asked. "Leaving before the sheriff comes." "To where?" "West. Roads are mud. River crossings are worse." "I will not let him take her." Silas closed the trunk lid. Clara opened it again. "Running will make his papers stronger," he said. "Staying will put her in his wagon." Lucy sat on the bed, holding the stable against her chest. Silas lowered his voice. "Give me until Friday. You cannot shoot a court order." The words struck cleanly. Clara regretted them at once, but did not take them back. Silas looked toward the gun at his hip. "No," he said. "That is not what I mean to do." He rode to Mercer before dawn. The courthouse clerk remembered Abel boasting about a timber claim inherited by his daughter. Silas carried the neighbor's statements to Judge Warren. The judge read them slowly. "This order gives Rusk temporary custody," he said, "issued on his claim that the child was kidnapped. She was abandoned. Then bring me a witness who will swear it." The neighbors lived 80 miles south. The river bridge had washed out. Silas returned after dark with mud to his knees and no answer Clara wanted. For 2 days they waited. Clara cooked because hands required work. No one ate much. Lucy stopped going to the barn. On Thursday night, Silas found her beneath the kitchen table, with the wooden horse in one hand. "You hiding?" he asked. She shook her head. He sat on the floor several feet away. His knees complained. "I used to hide in a grain bin," he said. "When I was about your age." Lucy studied him. "From who?" "My father, when he drank." It was a truth he had not spoken in 20 years, not to the men he rode with, not to the woman whose shawl still rested on the piano. "Did he find you?" "Sometimes." "What did you do?" Silas looked at the small horse. "I grew up, learned to make people afraid before they could frighten me." "Did it work?" "For a while." The child waited. "Then I had a wife," he said. "Her name was Anna. We had a boy named Samuel. Fever took them both in 1 week. Being feared did not help at all." Lucy crawled from beneath the table. She crossed the small distance and placed the wooden horse on his knee. Silas looked down at it. "For luck," she said. His hand closed carefully around the toy. "I will bring it back." The sheriff arrived Friday near noon with Abel and Judge Warren. Clara stood on the porch with Lucy behind her. Silas waited in the yard, unarmed. Abel noticed Silas's empty holster. Judge Warren said Silas had relevant information. Clara stepped forward. She will not be questioned by him. She need not be. The judge removed his hat. "But I must understand what happened." Lucy pressed her face against Clara's skirt. Silas knelt and placed the wooden horse on his open palm. "You do not have to tell a long story," he said. "Only what is true." "He left me at Mrs. Bell's," she whispered. Abel scoffed. "For a visit?" Lucy flinched. Silas did not look away from her. "What did he say?" "Said Mama was dead. Said I ate too much." "How long were you there?" the judge asked gently. Lucy held up both hands, then lowered 2 fingers. 8 months. "Lies taught by that woman," Abel said. Clara moved, but Silas rose first. He did not reach for a weapon. He simply stood between Abel and the child. Hoofbeats sounded from the south road. 3 riders approached, led by a heavy-set woman on a mule. Clara stared. Mrs. Bell. The woman climbed down before the mule stopped moving. Silas looked toward the judge. I sent a wire through the railroad station, asked them to come if they could. Mrs. Bell planted herself in the yard and pointed at Abel. That man left the girl with me on November 3rd, said he would return in 2 days. I fed her until May. Clara came after seeing my newspaper notice. The older writer produced a Bible with dates written inside its cover. The boy carried letters Abel had sent west, asking about work and never once mentioning a daughter. Judge Warren read everything. At last, the judge folded Abel's order. Temporary custody is suspended, pending a full hearing. The child remains with Mrs. Vale. Abel's face drained, then flushed. You cannot do that. The claim belongs to her, and I am her father. The judge's gaze sharpened. You have just explained your interest more clearly than your petition did. Abel ordered Lucy into the wagon. As she stepped back and Silas moved into his path, Abel's hand twitched beneath his coat. The sheriff drew first, not fast or dramatic, but with final certainty. Do not. Abel looked around the yard and found no fear he could use. He let his hand fall. The sheriff led him toward Mercer while Silas watched until the road emptied. Clara sat on the porch step and Lucy climbed into her lap. Near sunset, the visitors departed. The ranch grew quiet again. Clara found Silas in the barn, brushing Penny long after the mare's coat shone. The judge says the hearing may take months, she said. I know. Abel may come back. I know that too. Clara placed the new gloves on a stall rail. You hired a cook. You did not agree to court hearings, or frighten children, or men bringing trouble to your door. Silas set down the brush. If you want us gone, she continued, say it plain. I can bear plain words. He looked through the stall opening toward the cabin. Lucy stood in the doorway, holding her wooden stable. Smoke rose from the chimney into the soft evening sky. I expected one cook, he said. Clara's face went still. Silas rubbed a hand across Penny's neck. I was wrong about what I needed. Clara did not move. This house was quiet before you came, he said. Not peaceful, just quiet. She looked down at her gloves. If you leave because you want another life, I will hitch the wagon myself. If you leave because you think you are a burden, I will not help you pack. Clara's breath caught, but Silas raised a hand before she could answer. I am no fit father. I know that. But if Lucy needs a man to stand in a courthouse and say where she belongs, I will stand there. Clara's eyes filled. She blinked once, and the tears remained. And where does she belong? She asked. Silas looked toward the doorway. Lucy was waiting. Here, he said, if she wants. Lucy crossed the yard at a run, the first time Silas had ever seen her do it. She reached him and seized 2 of his fingers with her whole hand. Silas stood very still. Then his fingers closed around hers. Spring took the valley slowly. Snow withdrew into the shadows of the pines. Green shoots appeared along the creek. The river cleared, and cattle spread across the lower pasture with their calves beside them. The hearing was held in June. Mrs. Bell testified. So did Clara, the sheriff, and Silas. Judge Warren named Clara Lucy's legal guardian. Abel's claim to the timberland was placed beyond his reach. Silas took them to the mercantile afterward and bought Lucy a coat that fit, though summer had come. Back at the Broken Spur, Clara planted beans behind the cabin. Lucy carried water in a small tin pail, spilling half before she reached each row. Silas repaired the garden fence and pretended not to notice. The spare room changed. A yellow quilt covered the bed, and the pale wall marks disappeared beneath family pictures. Silas left Anna's shawl on the piano. Memory no longer needed an empty house to prove it had mattered. On the first cool evening of September, Clara made beef stew and a blackberry cobbler. Lucy set 3 places at the long table. She put Silas's spoon on the wrong side, then moved it after careful thought. Outside, wind came down from the Bitterroot country. It rattled the cottonwood leaves and pressed against the cabin door. Lucy looked toward it. Silas crossed the room and checked the latch. It was solid. He did not need the rawhide strap anymore, but he looped it through for her all the same. "It stays closed," he said. Lucy slipped her hand into his. Clara carried the cobbler to the table, and the lamplight warmed her face. The red rooster settled beneath the porch. Horses shifted softly in the barn. The stove ticked as iron expanded with heat. Silas stood between the woman who had come to cook and the little girl she had refused to leave behind. Once he had believed a home was something weather and death could empty forever. Now he understood it could fill again quietly. One plate, one mended button, one small held hand at a time. The wind kept moving across the dark valley. Inside the Broken Spur, no one faced it alone.